Alright, so I'm going to drive home what I started in the last video. I would recommend watching that. This is about how Trump is controlled by the Vatican, is a Catholic Jesuit, and you can look at these pictures coming up. I'm going to add a whole lot more information than even this video here has shown that'll really drive home what I began in the last video. I'm also going to be exposing a lot more about the Vatican's occultism, the Luxverbianism, how they control all these people. You don't have to watch the last video to really get the picture I'm about to unfold, but I would highly recommend starting from there if you get curious to go back and see what I'm relating things to and have that filled in. So yeah.
Most powerful Catholics in America right now, and here he's got Trump and Hillary.
What can I say about Donald Trump? Is he bought and paid for? It's just one of them.
We can also agree on the need to stand up to anti-Catholic bias, to defend religious liberty, and to create a culture that celebrates life.
And then he goes on to say this.
And we've got to come together, not only as a nation, but as a world community. Thank you very much. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you. Thank you.
So he's talking about the one world government there.
And we've
world
got
community.
we've got to come together, not only as a nation, but as a world community.
So Trump has been coming here his whole life, apparently, according to this statement here.
But I have great memories of coming to this dinner with my father over the years when I was a young man. Great experience for me.
So this guy, Trump, is definitely on the payroll of Rome.
As you can see, Trump also went to the University of Pennsylvania. He also went to Fordham University. Now, Fordham University is a Jesuit college. I would also recommend reading these articles here. The first one shows that Trump went to Fordham and the University of Pennsylvania, even though he claims to be Protestant, which is definitely not true. Now, Pennsylvania is funded by various Catholic Court Jews, the Annenberg Foundation, and the Order of St. Gregory, such as David L. Cohen, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the University of Pennsylvania. He was also named co-chairman of the Leadership Planning Committee of the Roman Catholic World Meeting Families in Philadelphia. Then 3 of Trump's children were University of Pennsylvania and Georgetown as well. It says he's surrounded by a bunch of Jesuits that are infiltrated into all government areas for many administrations now. Many of his staff are also Jesuit. So Paul Manafort, Steve Bannon are both Jesuits as well. And one very interesting part is they're talking about some globalism and how they have a long history of alumni serving in the top spots of the nation, but especially that the students of the university have a new responsibility to live out the university's Jesuit values, which is Catholicism.
Hello, Georgetown. A lot's happened in Washington over 2 centuries, and Hoyas have always been at the center of the action. Georgetown graduates have gone on to serve as president of this country and other countries, as members of Congress, and even as basketball-crazed senior advisors working down the hall from me in the West Wing. Over the years, you've welcomed countless international students, just as Georgetown students are known for serving all over the world. Simply put, this country and this world benefit from your commitment to Jesuit principles.
As a graduate of another great Jesuit institution, Xavier University, I have great affection for the value and purpose of a Jesuit education.
What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1500.
The First Lady asking the Pope to bless a rosary. Ivanka Trump said she was humbled.
About the Pope. The Pope's coming. Do you want to meet him?
Well, I'm Protestant, but I have great respect for the Pope. I like the Pope. I actually like him. He's becoming very political. There's no question about it. But I like him. He seems like a pretty good guy.
So here's the moment.
Senator Chuck Schumer has announced the winners of his statewide lottery for 100 pairs of tickets to be part of the papal audience on the west lawn of the Capitol.
U.S. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi met with Pope Francis in a private audience at the Vatican.
Displayed this with great pride in the Speaker's office in the Capitol.
The very idea of a meeting between the head of the Roman Catholic Church and the Russian Patriarch wasn't even seriously considered until 50 years ago.
The father of communism, Karl Marx, was trained by the Jesuits inside the British Museum in 1848. Likewise, Joseph Stalin studied at the Jesuit seminary in Tiflis, Soviet Georgia, to be educated for the priesthood. Stalin, who trained for the Jesuit priesthood, was Lenin's right-hand man in 1922, when Lenin formally lifted the official ban on the Jesuits in Soviet Russia. Stalin and Lenin were both Jesuit-trained Jews, Bolsheviks, and Grand Orient Lodge 33-degree Freemasons. This book quotes Friedrich Engels, who wrote, "Russian diplomacy formed a kind of new Jesuit order, quite powerful enough to overcome even the Tsar's whims."
Holy Father, your visit not only allows us, in some small way, to reciprocate the extraordinary hospitality that you extended to me at the Vatican last year, it also reveals how much all Americans, from every background and every faith, value the role that the Catholic Church plays in strengthening America. From my time working in impoverished neighborhoods with the Catholic Church in Chicago, Holy Father, we are grateful for your invaluable support of our new beginning with the Cuban people.
Well, now, I want to welcome Your Holiness to the United States, and on behalf of the American people, say how pleased and privileged we are to have you among us. We're just returning from a mission of peace, and I can think of no more fitting close to this journey than to be here in the presence of Your Holiness, who has worked so diligently for recognition of the rights and dignity of the individual and for peace among nations. Only when the fellowship of all men under the fatherhood of God is recognized and acknowledged, only then will the world finally know true peace and understanding.
said famously, when you looked into Vladimir Putin's eyes, you saw his soul.
Yeah.
When you look into Benedict XVI's eyes, what do you see?
God.
I want to begin with an overview of my own testimony, how I became a Roman Catholic priest, and I was a Catholic priest, a devout Catholic priest for 22 years. Our life was built around Mary, and we prayed mostly to Mary. It was the days before personal prayer came along. It wasn't to come along till the 1970s when the charismatic movement began in the Catholic Church. That was my earliest memories, was praying to Mary in the Rosary. And then I went to study with the Jesuits from primary school and secondary school. So the Jesuits had me from all my education. Then we started to study philosophy, the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas, based himself on Aristotle. Aristotle, a pagan 300 years before Christ came into the world. I have a book of 50 former priests, Far from Rome, Near to God, the testimonies of 50 former priests. It's the same with every one of those. Every single one, you studied philosophy at least for 2 years. I did it 3 years. Every single priest must study the philosophy of Greece through learning Aristotle. And they needed to prove some things in their theology. They needed some of the physics and metaphysics of Aristotle to prove some of their things to do with the sacraments. So that was actually, we found out the reason later. So we didn't study the Bible.
It's not a hatchet job by somebody that hates the Catholic Church. I was born Catholic, I was raised Catholic. I loved the Catholic Church. I was an altar boy. From the time I was 6 years old, I wanted to be a priest. Celibacy simply means you can't marry. It doesn't mean you can't have sexual relations. Abortions and infanticide were epidemic in convents and monasteries to cover up the sexual activities of the clergy. I had a professor in one of my theology courses who told me, essentially, and this guy was a priest, he had a doctorate degree, and he said that if I wanted to be like Christ, which of course every priest is supposed to be Christ-like, that what I needed to do is do what Christ did. That made sense. And so I said, okay, what does that mean? And he says, well, you've got to realize that after Jesus was an adult, he went and spent many years studying the occult. He went off to Egypt, he went off to India, studied with the gurus, he went to Tibet, and that's where he got all of these powers, was by studying these, with these occult masters in these various places. Discover that I was the only person, apparently, in the entire seminary that believed in the virgin birth, that believed that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, or that believed most of what I would consider normative Catholic doctrines. Because the final exam was I had to write an essay proving that Jesus didn't rise from the dead, and I wouldn't do it. That I have a lot of background in Catholic theology. I went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, Catholic college. I have a 3-year degree from a Catholic seminary. So when I start talking about these things, it's not because I'm an armchair scholar, it's because I live this stuff. And I to this day, I love the Catholic people. I love the Catholic Church, but I also want people to understand that it is becoming more and more evil almost by the year. And it is increasingly someplace that if you're in it, you want to get out of it. I'm going to demonstrate why that is, even by its own standards. This pedophile priest scandal shows no signs of going away, seems to be getting worse. It even has a giant Egyptian obelisk, a Masonic phallic symbol right from Egypt in the center of St. Peter's Square. You've all seen the pictures. The seminary that I went to had tunnels that went underground over to the convent. And the story was, of course, officially, that the nuns would come over.
I'm going to read a little bit of Codeword Barbelon. I'm taking snippets to convey a point. Science acquired through the assistance of the devil. On March 17, 1970, a curious article appeared in the Oakland Tribune. It was a report of an interview with Anton Szandor LaVey, the founder and high priest of the Church of Satan in San Francisco, and the author of the Satanic Bible. The Oakland Tribune article reported that LaVey had become a favorite speaker at the University of San Francisco. When asked about his engagements at that university, LaVey proudly replied, quote, "The Jesuits are my greatest audience," unquote. In case the reader was not already aware, the University of San Francisco is a renowned Jesuit institution of higher learning. The statement by Satanist Anton LaVey about his work at this Jesuit university is no mystery. We invite the reader to give attention to this most audacious passage found in the writings of the Jesuit scholar, Anthony Escobar. In his Secret Instructions, Escobar treats us to what is perhaps the most innovative principle of Jesuitism, that is Roman Catholicism. Quote, "It is lawful to make use of the science acquired through the assistance of the devil."
Fire! 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 Fire!
Escobar obviously knew his maxims on the science of the devil were contrary to proper norms, else he would not have taught them as, quote, secret instructions, unquote. Note also that Anton LaVey claimed that his goal was not so much to destroy organized religion as to supplant the belief in God with the worship of Satan. In this work he has had plenty of support from the Jesuits. Abundant testimony will be produced to this end. We've only just begun. We shall also see later that Escobar's dictum has proved popular and long-lived. Indeed, they say, and it is most true, that the Jesuits have shown a fondness for using sorcery for centuries. The question is, how does one acquire science or knowledge through the assistance of the devil? Unless one is a student of the devil, or without becoming a pawn of the devil, or having fraternity with the devil, we must leave this question for the very end, where we shall have a full and solid answer. Perhaps the reason the Jesuits believe that it is no sin to hold such vile doctrines, that is, of lying and equivocating under oath, and making use of science from the devil, and etc., is because the popes and the General Council at Rome grants them a plenary indulgence and pardon for all their sins. Further, the Jesuits are told, quote, "All things are just and lawful which are commanded by their superiors," unquote. "A mysterious cloud of darkness covers all the affairs of the Jesuits," Chateaubriand once said. The Jesuits too have their spiritual formula. A well-trained Jesuit is really a wizard in clerical robes. Consider, for example, Ignatius Valzin, who would quote, levitate on frequent occasions, unquote, during, quote, daily mass and other devotions, including the way of the cross and the rosary, unquote, on account of his practice of the spiritual exercises. The high regard in which the Catholic Church holds the spiritual exercises is seen from this decree by Pope Paul III on July 31st, 1548. So that their fruit may be more spread and more of the faithful may be induced to use them with greater devotion. We therefore have caused these instructions and exercises to be examined, and our Vicar General in things spiritual at Rome have found that these exercises are full of piety and holiness, and that they are and will be extremely useful and salutary for the spiritual profit of the faithful. We have besides, as we should, due regard to the rich fruits which Ignatius and the aforesaid society founded by him are constantly producing everywhere in the Church of God, and to the very great help which the said exercises have proved in this. In earlier chapters we read the diabolical tenets contained in their extreme oath and their lecture of initiation. Would a Jesuit really carry out the bloody pledges made in their abominable oath, or the plans laid down in their constitutions? H. Boehmer, professor of the University of Bonn, gives us a solid answer in his work, Les Jesuits. We imbue into him spiritual forces, which he would find very difficult to eliminate later. These forces can come up again to the surface sometime after years of not even mentioning them, and become so imperative, that is compelling, that the will of the Jesuit finds itself unable to oppose any obstacle and has to follow their irresistible impulse to the spiritual exercises, that is. And that was from Les Jesuits, from H. Boehmer. We have just read a most startling statement, that when a Jesuit is inducted into the order, he is placed under hypnotic processes, occult spiritual forces that can be invoked at any time in the future to compel him to do the bidding of his superiors. This is achieved through the spiritual exercises, a compulsory hypnotic induction for all Jesuits, which curiously is now very popular in some Protestant churches. These mysterious exercises owe their antecedents to the Islamic Sufis. Unlike the regular priesthood, Jesuits must undertake the spiritual exercises of Loyola. So, Scripta Moneta, on its face it purported to contain instructions from Fr. Claudio Poveda, the fifth general of the Society of Jesuits, addressed to the various superiors of the Jesuits around the world, and laying down the methods to be adopted for extending the power and influence of the order, and for increasing its wealth. Written in Latin, the preface specifically warns superiors not to allow it to fall into the hands of strangers, lest they form a bad opinion of the order. Of great interest to the Frenchman was the second chapter of these secret instructions, entitled, quote, What must be done to get the ear and intimacy of great men, said the instructions. We must endeavor to breed dissension among great men, and raise seditions, or anything a prince would have us to do to please him. If one who is chief minister of state to a monarch oppose us, and that prince cast his whole favors upon him, so as to add titles to his honor, we must present ourselves before him and court him in the highest degree, as well by visits as all humble respect. The most alarming part of the instructions was the final chapter, which read, We must be careful to change our politics conforming to the times, and excite the princes, friends of ours, to mutually make terrible wars, that everywhere the mediation of the society will be implored. Those who do not love us shall fear us. Alright, so the Anglican Church has Diocese of Ignatius Loyola. They represent the IHS logo, which is Jesuit. Now, the charismatic movement began in Anglicanism, which now we know that they've been Jesuit. So it's likely the spiritual exercises of Ignatius Loyola. Now the charismatic movement in the third wave has formed this new movement, the Vineyard movement, Holy Laughter, New Wine movement, Slain in Spirit, Alpha Course. It's become demonic, which I will expand on the Holy Laughter movement, but Rodney Howard-Browne, Kenneth Copeland have been involved in that movement and practice Holy Laughter. and the spiritual exercises of Ignatius Loyola, and they're also uniting under the Vatican, and all of this stuff comes from the Jesuits. So on the constitutions of the Jesuits, having been forced to produce the documents, the constitutions were laid before the French Parliament on April 16, 1761. The result, we are told, was disastrous for the Jesuits. The disclosure revealed Jesuitism to men as an organization based on the most iniquitous maxims and armed with the most terrible weapons for the accomplishment of their object, complete and utter world domination. How quickly, observed Griesinger, quote, they made haste to destroy by fire all copies of the same, as far as it was possible to get hold of them, but they soon became convinced, to their most profound grief, that they had been too late with all these measures. The statements and teachings of the Jesuits, as extracted from their own constitutions, were collected and presented to the King of France in a document titled Arrest du Parlement de Bretagne, du 23 December 1761 and May 1762. It charged the Jesuits with holding to a doctrine authorizing theft, lying, perjury, impurity, every passion and crime, teaching homicide, parricide, and regicide, overthrowing religion in order to substitute for it superstition, by favoring sorcery, blasphemy, irreligion, and idolatry. The above quote, taken from Isis Unveiled, corresponds exactly with extracts from a work which appeared in Paris in 1762, known as Extraits des Assertions des Jésuites. These assertions were published by order of the French Parliament, and the facts I am informed can be definitely verified by a visit to the British Museum and the Bodleian Library. 2 editions of the Extraits des Assertions were published by P.G. Simon in Paris in 1762 in 4 volumes. The title page of the work states that it is a collection of dangerous and pernicious teachings and precepts taught by the Jesuits with the approbation of their superiors. The government lawyers who examined the documents, the Breton Lachelotas in particular, quote, discovered in the constitutions a handbook of every known form of heresy, idolatry, and superstition. It provides, he said, tutelage and suicide, legicide, that is, the destruction of laws, and every kind of impurity, usury, sorcery, murder, cruelty, hatred, vendetta, insurrection, and treason. The constitutions further revealed that in order to fulfill the society's mission, the members of the order would create philosophies of left and right, that is called Hegelian dialectics today, so that the world would be divided into opposing factions. Needless to say, as a result of these discoveries, that is, those uncovered in the constitutions, the Jesuit order was dissolved in 1762, and finally in 1764, the sons of Loyola were driven out of France, mainly because of their attachment to the bloody doctrines of regicide and the obstinate refusal to modify their constitutions, which had been reinstated, and during their suppression they formed the Illuminati through Adam Weishaupt, and their founder, Ignatius Loyola, was Alumbrados of Spain. That was the earlier Illuminati. So they're basically just Gnostics, which Gnosticism is Satan and Lucifer worshippers. Phi Beta Kappa, literary societies, and Bill Clinton's Masonic membership, Codeword Barbelon. To return to the present day, it affords a curious glimpse into the methods used by the Illuminati in the advancement of its global mission, to mark the words of Adam Weishaupt, quote, a literary society, unquote, said Weishaupt, is the most proper form for the introduction of our order into any state where we are yet strangers. Soon after Weishaupt's new Illuminati was created in 1776, he wrote to a friend about the secret plans of the order in these words, the great strength of our order, that is the Illuminati, lies in its concealment. Let it never appear in any place in its own name, but always concealed by another name and another occupation. The form of a learned or literary society is best suited to our purpose, and had Freemasonry not existed, this cover would have been employed, and it may be much more than a cover. It may be a powerful engine in our hands. By establishing reading societies, that is, book clubs, and taking these under our direction, we may turn the public mind which way we will. In like manner, we must try to obtain an influence in the military academies. This may be of mighty consequence. A literary society is the most proper form for the introduction of our order into any state where we are yet strangers. Mark this fact. Now this is most important. Weishaupt and his collaborators devised to set up learned literary societies as a front for their purpose. Does history record any such learned secret literary society formed at or soon after 1776? And if so, does it continue on to this day? Did Weishaupt's literary societies survive beyond the 18th century? I invite the reader to consider closely the orders known as the Crown and Dagger, the Seventh Society, Phi Beta Kappa Society, Scroll and Key, and Skull and Bones, which George Bush is Skull and Bones. Consider also the lesser-known Bull Blood Seeker Society at Rutgers University, known as Lodge 443, established in 1834 by Frederick T. Frelinghuysen, William A. Newell, and Joseph Philo Bradley, a former justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Other interesting literary societies of high academia can be found at the renowned Leland Stanford University, amongst many others. Today, Stanford University has 15 literary fraternities, including the following: Alpha Epsilon Pi, Alpha Delta Phi Society, Alpha Phi Alpha, Delta Kappa Epsilon, Delta Upsilon, and Beta Chi. And most colleges have those fraternities. So skipping onward, illuminated history of Phi Beta Kappa. It all started on Thursday evening, December 5th, 1776, when 5 young undergraduates had a dinner in the Apollo Room at Raleigh Tavern in Williamsburg, Virginia. They were members of the notorious Flat Hat Club organized at William and Mary College in 1750. On this particular night, however, these 5 men decided to form a secret organization patterned after that of one formed in Germany. They called it Phi Beta Kappa. It was the first American secret society bearing a Greek letter name, and it was formed in the same year Weishaupt announced his Illuminati order in 1776. The extent of Rome's dominion was hinted at in an address given by Pope Pius to the Italian people on the occasion of the Episcopal Jubilee in 1877. Quote, "We 3 millions of subjects have 200 millions of brethren of every language and of every nation." Unquote. Said Cardinal Bellarmine, "The Catholic Church embraces all places, all nations, and all races of all men." Unquote. So powerful is Rome that, as Cardinal Manning said in a sermon given in 1867, "The nations not Catholic have among them so many millions of Catholic brethren and fellow subjects that, for their own internal welfare, as well as their external peace, it is in their highest interest to protect the head of the Catholic world." Unquote. Truth the vulgar crowd ought not to know. Albert Pike wrote secretly, quote, "The Templars, like all other secret orders and associations, had 2 doctrines, one concealed and reserved for the masters, the other public, which was Roman Catholic," which Albert Pike was a Luciferian. The Church of Rome follows the teachings of the pagan Varro, whom St. Augustine, that is Bishop of Hippo, report, quote, "There are things that are true which it is not useful for the vulgar crowd, that is the common people, to know, and certain things which, although they are false, it is expedient for the people to believe otherwise," unquote. Which the Vatican throughout history was suppressing the Bible and murdering the Bible believers and readers throughout history since Constantine. What are these things which you and I, that is the vulgar, ought not to know? We have already encountered many startling revelations and various hidden connections in this book, but none is more startling than what you are about to discover next. I remind you that thus far, all that we have advanced are in accordance with the facts from authentic and reliable sources, and this we shall continue to do to the end. We have proved to a virtual certainty that virtually all of the major secret societies are under one central command, situated in the Gesù at Rome. We saw too that the Catholic Church under John Paul II suddenly lifted the ban on its members being Freemasons. So we can conclude from this that the Church of Rome does not agree with or disapprove of the satanic, vulgar, and deceptive tenets of Masonry. In this penultimate chapter, What we desire to prove is this, that the power which seeks to form the next world government, as revealed by the Jesuit professor Malachi Martin, is none other than that system which Revelation calls Mystery Babylon, and that this power has its nerve center at the Vatican. Cracking the code, Devil's Masquerade, the secret doctrine revealed at last. What is this secret doctrine? The Roman Catholic Church is one of the very few, if not the only religion in Christendom which cultivates a system of symbolisms. Why? So as to conceal its mysteries. A.C.T. Pearson writes that the origin of the secret doctrine, or mysteries, throughout the world, though acknowledged under different appellations, were derived from one source, and can be traced to the plains of Shinar before the dispersion of mankind. This secret doctrine was also found among the Asiatics. The whole structure of paganism was built around a secret doctrine. Quote, each of the pagan gods had, besides the public or open ceremonies, a secret worship paid unto him, to which none are admitted but those who had been selected by preparatory ceremonies, called initiations. This secret worship, said Mackey, was termed the mysteries, hence the significance of the use in Revelation of the term Mystery Babylon. The respected John Cardinal Henry Newman revealed the true source of the Catholic Church's doctrines, which, tellingly, he also calls the secret doctrines. He writes, how is any secrecy practicable, seeing that the scriptures were open to everyone who chose to consult them? The secret doctrines of the early church, which he claims was Catholicism, have never been learnt merely from Scripture. Surely the sacred volume was never intended and is not adapted to teach us our creed, which the Bible is sufficient on its own, and that was the point of the Scriptures being compiled together, was to expose everything. So they don't follow the Bible, and that's been proven tens of thousands of times. Chrysostom, Bishop of Constantinople, of whom we read in an earlier chapter, returns a full and solid answer on what their secret doctrine is. Quote, I wish to speak openly, but I dare not, on account of those who are not initiated. Where the holy mysteries are celebrated, we drive away all uninitiated persons, and then close the doors, unquote. Which Jesus says he opens the doors, and no one can close them. And St. Cyril, Bishop of Alexandria, confirms that there is such a secret doctrine. Quote, these mysteries are so profound and so exalted that they can be comprehended by those only who are enlightened, that is, illuminated, which is Gnosticism, and Gnostics are Luciferians. So the real meaning behind the icons, symbols, and doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church are only revealed to the initiated. This, dear reader, is veiled Gnosticism. So what is this secret doctrine? It is the same doctrine held and understood by those of the 30th to 33rd degree of Freemasonry, the very doctrine taught by the Knights Templars, which is Johannism, that is Gnosticism or Kabbalism. So they're not Christian, and they don't follow the Bible, they follow paganism, which is Satanism. And it involves the veneration of the dead. Paragraphs 395 and 2683 of the New Catholic Catechism encourages communion with the dead, a practice adopted wholesale from the pagan mysteries of Babylon religion, and sentiments produced by a latent taint of superstition. Before moving on, we need also to say a few words of Cardinal Mariano Rampolla, from 1843 to 1913, one of those significant yet shadowy and largely unknown figures of the modern Catholic Church. Cardinal Rampolla had a stellar career within the Vatican. He entered papal service during the pontificate of Leo and later became Secretary of Propaganda, that is the Church's Department of Doctrinal Correctness, before becoming Secretary of State for the Vatican. In 1903, he almost became Pope after the death of Pope Leo. His mentor, dear reader, was none other than the Freemason and Satanist Aleister Crowley. After Rampolla's death, his personal papers revealed that not only was he a high Freemason, but as Malachi Martin confirmed, Rampolla was deeply initiated into Satanism. In his book, The Keys of This Blood, page 535 and 536, and Malachi Martin was an advisor to over 3 popes, and he's saying that there is Luciferian Satanism throughout the Catholic Church. This brings us nicely back to the secret password of the 32nd degree of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, Abaddon. Another formidable secret of Freemasonry was sex magic through pedophilia. Satanist Aleister Crowley revealed, and this is a Templar Masonic teaching of the highest degree, that the Mason's path to eternal life is the sexual violation of little children. That is, every time a Satanist or Freemason has sex with a child or young person, he steals some of the child's youth, so they say. This is why we have a mushrooming epidemic of child abuse spreading like a plague, and that's also throughout the Vatican.